your classroom, or our experience has been that some teachers use some components of it. I know that was my experience when I first really learned inquiry and went through a week-long Inquiry Institute. Thought, well, I do the inquiry already, but as I found out, I did components of it, and it changed my teaching, and it was a lot. The results were improved because I had all the components after I went through that week-long institute. So keep in mind that I'm giving you a lot of information, as you guys know from our last workshop in October, and a little bit what we did this morning. We do not like to do a lot of direct instruction. We like to get you guys moving and actually discussing and hands-on activities, but this part is more direct instruction for you guys. So in that challenge, there are different types of inquiry models. You hear us refer a lot to Wiggins and McTeague, so we use a lot of their material. It's very similar to the one that we use the most, which is based on Jeff Wilhelm's work. And I know that we mentioned his name in October when we visited, and I don't know that we articulated that he is the director of the Boise State Writing Project, so that's one reason we do use his material. He is who guides us, but also in his model, he has all of those components, and it's based on the apprenticeship model of instruction. And we see apprenticeship, it's been used throughout history. It continues to be used in cultures all over the world, in all sorts of careers. You know, we're teachers. How many of us went through student teaching? That is a type of apprenticeship. Not everyone, and I understand that, but the apprenticeship model, it's just there's evidence of it throughout history, currently, and all over the world. Yes?
I was just looking at this. I couldn't help notice that Wilhelm's column there is scientific method, step by step.
Okay. Yeah.
Of course, it's been used now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of the similar components of that. So there are a lot of pluses, not just that he's our director, because that would be just an easy assumption. But we do truly believe in the material that he's doing, and that's what we use in our classroom. So in the apprenticeship model, you'll find 6 major components. There are the 6 M's. It's the easier way to kind of remember them. There's motivate, which is done through essential questions and front loading. Modeling, which is a scaffolding principle. If it's the I do, we do, you do, and you've seen us model that. We model something, we do it together, and then we release responsibility over to you. That's the modeling. That's the mentoring, the we do, the monitoring, the you do. And as you saw in the 3 examples that were articulated today, it's something that we naturally do. The multiple modalities, that is open for differentiation in our classroom. And then the 6th M is multiple measures of success. So this type of inquiry model does do a lot of formative and summative assessments, because I found it interesting that none of the examples had me sit down and gave me a worksheet to fill out and then have a quiz to see if I could actually go and touch a golf club or a measuring cup or a basketball. I think it's never been brought up. All the times of all these workshops that I've asked, nobody gives me a worksheet, and nobody gives me this multiple choice assessment at the end. But what do we do in the classroom? So I think that's interesting. So It's intuitive. It's we can connect it to a lot of personal experiences, and it just goes back to the relevance of what are we doing, okay? So to break these parts down a little bit more, the motivation is done through essential questioning, which will walk you through, and it's the first hook for students. It's a huge component of coming up with a unit. It's really difficult. I still find it difficult, and it's almost like the essential question can break your unit or make it this great unit if you can just get them hooked with that question, and that begins to build their inquiry. And then front loading, that's how you can assess their background knowledge or build the background knowledge that you need to proceed with your unit. Modeling, it just goes back to the practice. We've demonstrated that through the read alouds, through the think alouds. We will talk about some drama and action strategies or visual strategies later on today. The mentoring in this component is done when you release the responsibility. The mentoring goes back to the scaffolding principle of after I model, then we do together. It's a whole practicing of the skills. It's active participation in the actual discipline. Again, practicing the skills, and that's when you begin to release that responsibility. As you are assessing whether they're understanding, you can begin to take more and more steps back. And that's the guiding part that you saw in each of the examples that were articulated. Let's see here. The monitoring component, it's students do together or alone, and that's when you really step back and just watch them do and practice and take ownership of the skills that you've already talked about and practice in class. Students create their own culminating projects that demonstrate their mastery and understanding in actual accomplishment, focusing on skills, not activity, as is emphasized by the Common Core. And then the multiple modalities, and we saw that with the Common Core, that they assess and they encourage incorporating different modalities for students in different forms. And this is what opens it up for differentiation. Multiple measures throughout a unit. A lot of these activities can be used as formative assessment, and we encourage them for you to use a lot of formative assessments so that you don't get to that unit. I don't know if any of you have experienced that. I know I have. That I get to the end of a unit and I get that final assessment and it's not what I expected them to create, or it wasn't the final project, and then I thought, oh, I should have maybe assess them earlier and should have retaught this part because they're all making this mistake or something. So had I included formative assessments, maybe I could have caught that earlier on instead of at the end of that unit. So inquiry incorporates a lot of that. We encourage that. And I know that Kelly brought up the backwards planning and beginning with the end in mind.